Joining us on the show tonight is Governor Ron DeSantis. He just recently announced his 2024 presidential candidacy. Governor, thank you so much for joining us. We truly appreciate it. Why don't we start by talking about the launch of your campaign using Twitter? There were clearly some technical glitches that happened on Twitter Spaces, and yet there was a metric shit ton of people looking to watch, as well as watching. I think there was something close to 700,000 people that were watching live.
Yeah, and actually, talking to us on Twitter, there are actually many more who couldn't even get to that part of the queue, and so it caused their system to basically melt down, and they've never seen anything like it. So I think there was a huge amount of interest. Part of the reason we did do it this way is because we figured with Elon involved that would reach a wider range of people than would just do a traditional campaign rally, and so there was a lot of buzz generated. For those who've been able to watch it, I think like across all the different ones that have it, I think it's over 9 million between the live stream and between David Sax's one. So that's really, really significant. Obviously I made the announcement. I did a little bit of a riff to start, but then a lot of it was just talking about the issues facing the country and being able to answer questions that people had. We need to do more of that in this country. We're not here to be entertainers. We're here to be leaders. And ultimately, a leader is measured by what kind of results you're ultimately able to deliver. We've delivered great results in Florida because we focused on what matters to the people of the state. And I think we'd bring that same know-how to Washington to focus on what matters to the people of the United States.
Governor DeSantis, there are many folks out there that think that President Biden has been doing a terrible job leading the country. But standing in your way is a formidable rival. President Trump was the first to declare his intent to run. And so far, there has been no one who has stood up or opposed him in really any meaningful way. And national polling currently has him up significantly. How do you see your candidacy being different than his and what you're looking to do? And most importantly, can you compare your track record versus President Trump's?
Well, I think it's interesting because he's been attacking me by moving left. So this is a different guy than 2015, 2016. He attacked me for opposing an amnesty bill in the Congress. He did support this amnesty, this good lot too. 2 million illegal aliens he wanted to amnesty. I opposed it because that's what America First principles dictate, that you're opposed to amnesty. He also attacked me for voting against an omnibus spending bill that was bloated, full of pork, and that racked up huge amount of debt for this country. Yes, I voted against the omnibus. He signed every omnibus that was put on his desk. And so I think it's odd that he's doubling down on those positions because those were instances in which his actions did not match his campaign rhetoric. And I also think just the difference between 2015 and 16 and now is I, as chief executive of Florida, and he as chief executive of the United States, we both faced COVID-19 and we both responded in the way we did. He responded by elevating Anthony Fauci and really turning the reins over to Dr. Fauci, and I think to terrible consequences for the United States. I was the leader in this country in fighting back against Fauci. We bucked him every step of the way, starting in April of 2020, whether it's the schools, the businesses, the mandates, and our state has never done better as a result. We're number one in migration, number one for growth, and we continue to see great things happen. But it required me to cut against the grain. It required me to know that every decision I made was going to be met with opposition from the media and from the left. But you do what's right and you don't let them cow you. And so I think Fauci should have been fired. And I think the fact that Donald Trump gave Anthony Fauci a presidential commendation on Trump's last day in office, that was a gut punch to millions of people around this country who were harmed by Fauci's lockdowns.
Governor, just recently, Donald Trump attacked you by saying that Andrew Cuomo had done a better job in New York, which is shocking to anybody paying attention when it comes to COVID. Andrew Cuomo obviously did not do a better job. And he's out there using fake statistics and using absolute numbers for people who died in the state, as opposed to looking at those numbers from a population adjusted perspective. And that distortion of numbers is something that I talk about all the time on my channel. And it's deeply dishonest on the statistical level. I'm curious, what's your take on these attacks?
They're very bizarre. I mean, first of all, Florida had less excess mortality than California or New York. Part of that is because states like California had excess mortality derived from the lockdown policies, which is really, really avoidable mortality. But if he thinks Cuomo handled it better, that's an indication if something like this were to happen again, he would double down and do what he did in March of 2020. That was a difficult situation. We didn't have all the facts, and people can kind of understand, if you did things that may not have worked out. But we all have to sit here today in 2023, look back at March of 2020 and say Fauciism was wrong. Fauciism was destructive. Fauciism has set us on this path with the CARES Act and the Fed printing money, creating inflation, and creating some of the economic problems that we have today. So if you could do it again, would he do the same thing? I sure hope not, because those were not the right decisions to make. And I've said very clearly, if I'm president, somebody like Fauci is in the government, I will bring them in and I will tell them two things. You are fired.
Governor Desantis, one of the other areas that Donald Trump has tried to create controversy is by suggesting that there are high crime rates in the state of Florida. And President Trump defines himself as being a law and order candidate. There's only one little problem with that. We were all paying attention in 2020, and the National Guard was not deployed, despite massive rioting in America's major cities. You took a very different approach, and as governor of the state of Florida, you took very strong positions on crime, and you went as far as even incentivizing police officers and made them want to come to Florida and do their job by giving them cash stipends. Perhaps you could talk about that for us a little bit.
Well, first of all, Florida's crime rate is at a 50-year low. That's just a fact. And it hit a 50-year low during my administration. But a lot of that is because local people, local government, local law enforcement done a good job. But it's hit a 50-year low while crime has been spiking in other places around the country. So we're counter trend for what's been happening in the United States. One of the main reasons families have moved to Florida since I've been governor is because of public safety, because they know we're a law and order state. So that's delusional to say that somehow Florida, has bad crime. And you can see that in the migration patterns. People are leaving high crime areas and they're coming here. When the Floyd riots were going on in Minneapolis, I called out the National Guard in Florida immediately. I had state law enforcement deployed. We work with our local partners. We said very clearly, you're not burning cities down here. We'll put a stop to it if it happens. And sure enough, it didn't end up happening. We've also enacted legislation to crack down on rioters with tougher penalties and to prevent local governments from defunding the police. But I think one of the things that we've seen is, under the Trump administration, he enacted a bill, basically a jailbreak bill. It's called the First Step Act. It has allowed dangerous people out of prison who have now reoffended and really, really hurt a number of people. So one of the things I want to do as president is go to Congress and seek the repeal of the First Step Act. If you are in jail, you should serve your time. And the idea that they're releasing people who have not been rehabilitated early so that they can prey on people in our society is a huge, huge mistake.
Governor DeSantis, one of the big questions that comes up in presidential elections, it came up in 2020, and I'm sure it will come up in 2024, is the claim of rigged elections. Donald Trump claims it was rigged. Now, even if it were true, how do you intend to reverse this sort of thing? If you're worried that the voting rules have changed, how do you plan to actually win, given the fact that 2020 didn't go the way that Donald Trump wanted it to go? You took a very different approach in the state of Florida, and you can clearly see the results with a 20-point shift between 2018 and 2020. Can you talk about your on-the-ground strategy and how it would be different from what President Trump did in 2020, running against the Democrats?
The left is going to throw the kitchen sink at any Republican. You've got to be ready for that. So in 2020, we saw these states, largely because of the Fauci state of emergency for COVID, they used that as a pretext to change the rules, the way voting happened. They embraced this mail balloting and ballot harvesting. Of course, I think that that's wrong. But if I were the candidate, I would have gone in and combated that, either had our people doing the same ballot harvesting or been more aggressive to try to head that off in terms of some of the legal challenges. I also look at how the federal government colluded with some of the tech companies to censor information, like the Hunter Biden story. That's election interference. It's totally unfair. But I would also point out that was Donald Trump's FBI and Donald Trump's DHS that was doing that. He didn't have control over his own agencies. If somebody in my government were doing that, they would have been fired the next day. And so you've got to take the responsibility as the candidate to shape the battlefield in a way that's going to be most advantageous to your side winning. So what I'll do, obviously in Florida, we did it very effectively, but nationally, you look to see what the rules of the game are. Yes, we ban ballot harvesting in Florida. That's what you should do. Yes, we ban Zuckerbucks in Florida. That's what you should do. However, not every state has done that. So if you're in a state like Nevada, that's a mass mail balloting state with ballot harvesting and Zuckerbucks, we will have organizations in place so that we can exploit that system. If you have it in Wisconsin, we will have organizations in place to exploit that system. I think telling people not to send in a mail ballot is a huge mistake, and it ends up reducing the pool of prospective voters. In Florida, we focused on some of these low propensity voters in my reelection. They usually vote in presidential. They don't always vote in midterm. And we converted a lot of them to vote. Most of them chose to vote by absentee ballot through the mail. That was their choice. If we told them you could only vote on election day, some of them very well may not have voted. So understand the battlefield. It's your responsibility as a candidate to head off that. But every single candidate that we would nominate is going to face this from the left, the Democrats, and the media. And what I've told people, if you nominate me, I'm not going to make excuses. I'm going to get it done, and we'll be sworn in as president on January 20th, 2025.
Governor DeSantis, one final question, because I know you're pressed for time. President Trump has threatened to not participate in any primary debate. I think he's assuming that he will be appointed by acclamation. What is your take on these threats not to engage in debate with any of the other candidates?
Well, look, I mean, I'm a blue collar kid. I started working for minimum wage. I learned very early on, I'm not entitled to anything. You got to earn it in this world. And I think this nomination is something people have to earn. Nobody's entitled to be nominated. And so I intend to earn it. I think those debates are an important part of the process. So Republicans across the country can size up candidates and see what they think. I look forward to participating in them because I think we've got a great story to tell. And I think that the contrast between me and some of the other candidates, I think will be favorable. And I think it'll help us win the nomination.
Well, that is Governor Ron DeSantis, and he has many big things and some massive weeks coming up ahead. If you'd like to give to his campaign, please head over to rondesantis.com. Governor, I truly appreciate this. Thank you so much for your time and best of luck.
Hey, thanks so much. We appreciate everybody's support.
Now, I hope you enjoyed this interview as much as I did. And to be totally transparent, I did not do this interview. This was an interview that was done with Ben Shapiro and the Daily Wire. So huge shout out to both Ben and the Daily Wire because your interview was incredible. But I'm hoping that I can leverage this to actually get Governor Ron DeSantis on for an interview. So if you would, please retweet this as much as humanly possible at Ron DeSantis or any other influencer that you think might help in order for us to actually have an interview. And all candidates are welcome on my channel. I invite everyone to come and have a conversation because we would love to know exactly where you stand. Now, I hope you enjoyed this. Please subscribe to the channel if you found any value. Follow me on Twitter and check out my next video because I suspect you will love it a lot. And until next time, peace.